While we're honing our skills on programming, it's imperative that we also level up our skills on the tools we use. Specifically, I want to talk to you today about the debugger. The debugger is a tool programmers use to stop the code in its execution and peek around and make sure everything's going all right. So in this episode, I'm going to show you how to use the debugger in Intellij, and I'm also going to show you how to use the evaluator in Intellij. So I've written some code here to connect to a database via a database manager and actually get some results from the database and attempt to print it out. Now if we run it, we are going to see a DB exception was thrown. So somehow we're getting an exception. So when we are using a debugger, make sure you're actually hitting debug, or if you're playing it this way, you're clicking debug here. You can do it's called a breakpoint. You can set a breakpoint, which is basically the program will lock execution here. It's showing this right now. We are now running the code. The code is locked right here. If I want to go inside of a function or a constructor, I use this step into. So if we go into here, that's us creating a database manager. If I want to move to the next instruction in the current code document, I click step over. Here we can step into the database manager connect function. Here we see is connected is equal to true. Now if we go over here, we're going to perform that call. In this case, I'm going to skip over to show you that the exception is being thrown. And now we see that the exception was thrown. So I was a little too fast here, but let's try it again. Let me remove this debugger here. And what's really cool about the debugger is you can put your mouse over something, a variable, and you can see what's inside. So we can see that there is no detail message, but we can see that there's a cause, and we can go into more of what this is. We can even see what result equals at this point in time, and we actually know that it's an empty string from up here, but it's kind of interesting. If we move next, you can see what the actual value of result is. So let's run this again. Let's put a debug breakpoint here. Now we're running. Now let's step into, and in IntelliJ you can tell it which one to step into. I know that toString is going to be fine. So let's go into get result. So okay, so this is connected. For some reason is not true. So if we keep going, this is evaluated to false. And if we look up here and try to figure out why, it looks like someone has created two different variables to denote a connection, and they have set one of them as a static thing, which means it's across this entire class. I don't know why someone would do that. Let's get rid of it. And this shouldn't be static either. This should be sort of based on a instantiation. So now let's change this dot connected to true. Let's let ourselves just finish the program, and now let's rerun it. Again, let's step into, and now let's see. Oh, wow, it worked. We can return 1. So if we come out here, we're going to return 1. And now the program exits gracefully with the correct information. One more thing I want to show you, which is really, really cool. Let's put a breakpoint right at the part where we say results. The whole process happens, and now we're here. With the evaluator, which is this thing, you can set memory on the fly to whatever you'd like. So if I wanted to take the word result and turn it into Pluto is not a planet, and I hit enter, I have just set this result variable to be this. And if I hit play, we see Pluto's not a planet. I actually just changed the way the program ran from running that arbitrary code in the evaluator here. And this is a really important thing. So as an example, we could run this again, and we go into the DB manager, and I can set this dot connected to equal false. Right? And now we're going to throw a database exception because I explicitly set that variable to be false using that evaluator. And we're going to see the result that the DB exception was thrown. I tend to use the evaluator to try to force things to happen when it's hard for me to test code. When it's hard for me to isolate sort of a bug, but I know kind of how to get it to happen. Let's just say, like, this DB manager code is deep within the bowels of our code base, and it's really hard for me to recreate this issue. Well, what I can do is I can go into the database manager, the class that I know is messed up, put a breakpoint here, then I can actually set this memory here to be whatever I want and recreate the bug. Additionally, there's something called a stack here. And what the stack is basically who's running this code. So we know that get result is being run. Well, where is it running? Well, it's running in the main function. In fact, it's running on main line 15. And as your code gets more crazy with more object-oriented sort of design, and you have more things calling other things, you get this, it's called a stack. You get this stack that gets pretty crazy, but you can trace up the stack if you need to. So the debugger here is really for the programmer to use to understand what's going on in the code. And it is super helpful to be able to use a debugger. In the 60s and 50s, they didn't have debuggers, and so they would have to like take their code and inspect where things could go wrong. Where here, we can actually just set a sort of an instruction in the code to halt at a given spot. In fact, if you right-click on the breakpoint, you can even specify a Boolean that to cause this breakpoint to be active. So you could tell this breakpoint when it is acceptable to pause the debug run. And you can even say, do I want to suspend all of my threads or a singular thread? If you don't know what a thread is, don't worry, we'll talk about that soon. But the debugger is one of the most critical things. I overuse this word critical. The debugger is one of the most important tools we have to understand how code is evaluating and how code is behaving. I hope this was informative. I hope you understand how to use a debugger and why to use a debugger. But if you like this video, please subscribe. Please like the video as well. Show us to your friends. I love sort of showing all these little tricks and tips for other people who aren't really aware of them. If you have some ideas of how we can be more effective in these videos, please do not hesitate to comment or send me a message. Thank you very much, guys.